True, but let's just say you retire at, 65, you've got a 20-year life expectancy, and you're saving $6,500 in tax each and every year. What are we talking about? $130,000 in tax saving over your retirement.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. I mean, you look.
Welcome to 360 Money Matters, where financial planners Billy and Andrew talk all things financial planning. This podcast aims to increase your knowledge and confidence with all things money. Each week, they will cover topics such as investing, cash flow, budgeting, saving, passive income, debt management, and much more, so you can live a life on your terms without limits.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 360 Money Matters podcast. I'm Billy and I'm joined by my co-host,
Andrew. Bills, here we are back again, back on the podcast.
Andrew, we are, and this is our favourite time of the week, talking to our listeners and our viewers about all things financial advice.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are we doing today? What are we talking about, Bills?
We're talking about downsizing and a couple of the things that sit around that. I mean, why would you downsize? What does it look like? What are the most common things that we think about when we see people going through it? What's going through their minds? Plus, also from a technical perspective, how does that then relate into, I guess, the space that we talk to clients about all of the time is retirement income, and what does that look like just from a general wealth perspective as well too. So all things downsizing.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, why would you do it? Why downsize? I mean, it sounds like a pretty obvious question, but what's the primary driver between people downsizing and some of the benefits associated?
Well, look, I think being a parent of two, as soon as the last child is out of the house, you downsize to something smaller to make sure that you don't have any room for them to return.
Really? Okay.
In the event that they, once they're out of the house, that's it, we downsize. And if they ever want to come back, you're like, sorry, we don't have any room.
Nice. So it's not a financial planning strategy. It's a keep the kids out of your hair strategy.
That's it. That's exactly it. But no, look, sort of on that note, I think if you kind of consider the way that, I guess it generally works for the majority of people. If you decide to have a family, or if you're in a position to have a family, you buy a family home, an owner-occupier that's big enough to raise your family. At a certain point in time, a couple of things happen. The children, hopefully, end up moving out of the house and, leaving the nest, so to speak. So you've got all of this space that would accommodate a much larger family that you're no longer utilising anymore. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is I think as you get older, the upkeep and the maintenance of a bigger house probably becomes more of a burden and becomes too onerous. Yeah. So I think there's two things at play there. There's probably a third thing, which is the financial opportunity, which we'll talk about in a sec. But I think, as you progress through your life stages, I think you get to a certain point in time where you go, okay, it's done its job. We don't necessarily need as big of a house as what we've had previously in the past. And it's time for us to, as the name suggests, sell it, downsize to something maybe not necessarily smaller per se. I mean, there's a whole different range of things around it, but I think something that's probably more fit for purpose. And most of the time, what we're seeing in our world is that there is this excess of money that also comes with buying a smaller property or a cheaper property that's more fit for purpose for that life stage.
Yeah. So really, I mean, when you talk about it from a finance perspective, it's, okay, I'm going to retire and I'm going to have a passive income of X, and I've got all of this equity that's tied up in a family home, and I can, in essence, still, have a property that I live in, still have a property that I'm happy with that has enough space, downsize the family home, and all of a sudden my retirement income goes from here to here. So it's an ability to be able to draw equity out of something that was, or previously just purely an enjoyment asset, not an asset that was deriving any actual, wealth creation, so to speak.
Yeah. Yep. So I might put a hypothetical example. Say you've got a family home worth $2 million, four bedroom property. So it's enough to accommodate sort of a couple of parents and a couple of children, maybe with a spare room. You sell that because the kids are off your hands. It's too big. It may not necessarily be in the suburb that you want. So you sell that for $2 million, right? And you go and buy something, maybe it's closer to the city, less maintenance, maybe an apartment as an example, and you spend $1.5 million on it. So not only have you gone from a family home that has 4 bedrooms that needs maintenance and upkeep and all of the fun stuff associated with it. You go to something that's brand new. Maybe it's in a different location that suits your lifestyle. Maybe there's only 3 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms instead of 4. You're paying body corporate, so a lot of the things that get done on the property is being done by somebody else. But at the same time, you've then gone and released $500,000 in this hypothetical example, going, okay, we've gone and released $500,000 worth of equity or value or capital. What do we then do with that money? Can we use that to help generate some sort of income for us while we're in retirement and create some passive income, so to speak, off that hypothetical $500,000?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the other key drivers behind why it's so attractive for people is you're talking about selling an asset where there's no capital gains. So in terms of capital gains tax, you completely wipe that off the table, versus potentially looking at like investment properties, which might be deriving an income, but not a fantastic yield or income, but there's capital gains tax associated with selling it. So you sell owner occupied property or a property that you've lived in the entire time, you don't pay a hefty amount of tax, and you still get to release those funds to be able to use for an investment purpose. The other sort of consideration with it is, okay, you've released those funds. Yep. Now what do you do with it? And if you've been listening to the podcast for a little while, you've probably heard us talk many times about the benefits associated with holding money inside of superannuation, and how superannuation in retirement is a tax-free environment. So
did you say tax-free?
You were waiting for that one, weren't you?
We haven't done that one in a while, sorry.
Sorry, trying to get back on track. I didn't expect that. So you're talking about trying to drive money into an environment that's tax-free, and it's the biggest limitation towards being able to do so, particularly in the later years, and if you haven't staggered it out, is the contribution limits.
Yep.
So you've released all of this equity. Now what do? You look at, hey, do I invest it in superannuation? Yes, I want it there because I want it to be invested in a tax-free environment. Okay, now I'm limited by how much I can actually contribute towards superannuation. But there are some provisions that can help you drive some additional funds into superannuation and still be able to use the equity that you've got built up in your family home and still hold it in a tax-free environment as well.
Yeah, so one of the, smarter policy decisions that we've seen the government do, and it's under the guise of trying to release, really 2 things. I think that the primary objective is to trying to release property and make it available to people that need it. So rather than having retirees sitting on these, properties that aren't necessarily fit for purpose per se, because there's 2 people living in a house that can accommodate 6, by making it attractive to be able to put some money into superannuation, and we'll get to the specifics in a sec, obviously provides opportunity for families to then be able to get into the market. I also think it's an opportunity for the government to release that equity that's in a property. If that's producing some form of income, someone is going to spend it somewhere down the track somehow, and the government's going to be able to tax that. So I think it also represents an opportunity for the government to increase their revenue if they can extract some of that equity out of the property market as well. But I digress. So one of the smarter policy decisions that the government has done is to try and encourage this behaviour is they've introduced what's called a downsizer contribution. Yep. So what that allows somebody to do, assuming that you're over 55 years of age, you've owned the property for at least 10 years, and at some point in time during that 10 years, it's been exempt from CGT. So let's say it's been your principal place of residence for a period of time. You can contribute per person, up to obviously 2 members of the household, $300,000 each. So if you're in a relationship, you can do $300,000 each. You can get $600,000 into your superannuation with the downsizer contribution. And that does not impact any of your other concessional or non-concessional caps as well too. So in a short, sharp period of time, talking about some of the challenges that we see with clients who are trying to get money into superannuation faster, it becomes quite a challenge because you are limited to how much you can put in. This is a great opportunity to put in up to $300,000 per person in a really short period of time. There's some intricacies around notifying your superannuation fund and when it happens, but essentially for a household, 2 people, $600,000.
Yeah. So you're talking $600,000 in downsizer contributions that you could potentially do. Assuming that you haven't made after-tax superannuation contributions as well, you're talking about, bring forward $120,000, so $360,000. Apologies for those that didn't follow with that, but there's another $360,000 in after-tax contributions that you can also put into superannuation each. So that's $720 plus $600,000.
620.
300,000.
3 and 30
is 3 and 3 600 plus the 760 in downsizer contributions. You're talking about $1.36 million as a couple. Yep, that you could do fairly instantaneously into superannuation. So that's a really hefty amount that you can drop in a really short period of time and house in a tax-free environment. So really some pretty massive opportunity there for people. And some of the questions that we often get asked is, okay, superannuation, it's risky. I'm risking where the money is going to be invested. I'd rather, just hold it in my bank account, just hold a term deposit. I know that I'm not generating, a huge amount of income, but I feel comfortable or safe. Superannuation can be structured like that. So you could hold, not necessarily that, this is how you should do it, because everybody's different and you probably want some opportunity for growth as well. But you could hold $1 million in superannuation in a term deposit. Still invested in a term deposit, still exactly operates how a term deposit does. Outside of superannuation, the only difference is that the income is tax-free inside of superannuation versus taxable outside of superannuation. So really, regardless of how you want the investments to be structured or how you want the actual investments to be invested, superannuation for the vast majority of people, when you're in your retirement phase, is where you want it to be. And this is an opportunity to be able to drive some money into superannuation in a really short period of time where otherwise just wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to call out as well too, Andrew, because that can't be understated. We might talk some numbers in a sec in terms of the hypothetical tax saving with this, but one of the challenges that we see with that is if people are worried about that, from an investment perspective, it's usually an education piece. I think first and foremost, and we'll do some numbers in a sec to illustrate. The second thing is to keep in mind is that once you have access to your superannuation, it's not like it is when you're in accumulation phase. Yeah. So one of the challenges that we see, and it's a valid consideration, is if I put money into superannuation today, I can't access it. Once you are in pension phase and you do have access to your money, there are no restrictions on how much you can get. There's minimums that you need to take out, but you can take it. You've got complete access to it. So that I think once again just comes down to an education piece as well too. That even if you enacted an exercise like this because the timing was right, you downsized your house and it ticked all of those boxes for you, you're not locking up that money inside superannuation the same way that you would when you were in accumulation phase during your working life. Yeah. So I think that's a really important one to call out because people can get confused with that and it can detract them. But the numbers are quite fascinating. So let's go back to your hypothetical example before where you've got $1 million in superannuation, and we'll just talk about an individual person because I think that's easy. And let's just say you've got $1 million in super versus $1 million and you invest it in a term deposit. Just to make the numbers easier, let's say you get a 5% rate of return, so you're generating $50,000 per annum. If that's in superannuation, you will pay zero tax on that, assuming that you're in pension phase. So let's just get that right. So $50,000 of tax-free income, whereas if you had that in a term deposit in your own name, that $50,000 will be assessable income. In terms of the tax that you pay on $50,000, it's $8,000 or $9,000. Yep. So you're talking.
Now that's assuming that you don't have any other assets as well. Yep. So if you've got maybe an investment property or something sitting on the side, I mean, you could be looking at $10,000 to $15,000 worth of tax.
Yep.
So you're talking about a tax saving of $10,000 to $15,000 by investing in $10,000 to $15,000 per year. So it's not like it's a once-off benefit that you get or you don't get and that's it. You're talking about a tax benefit that you're going to get every single year, and the only difference is which environment you hold the money in. It's absolutely
no-brainer.
Incredible.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the time it's just, like I said, I think it's just education more than anything.
Yeah. And Billy's just pulling up the exact numbers now. So if we're talking about, $50,000 in taxable income.
Oh, there we go. 6,500. So if you're earning income of $50,000 on the tax rates for this financial year, 24-25, it's $6,500 in tax each and every year.
Yeah. It's absolutely ludicrous to pay excess money for no reason.
Let's just throw, this is not going to ring true, but let's just say you retire at, 65, you've got a 20-year life expectancy, and you're saving $6,500 in tax each and every year. What are we talking about? $130,000 in tax saving over your retirement.
Yeah. It's absolutely insane. I mean, you look, $6,500, that's your holiday every year.
Yeah, really good way to put it.
Yeah. Another consideration is to potentially not even utilize any of the superannuation benefits that are associated with downsizing. So, and I'll use an example, and this is a live example of a couple that I'm going through this exact scenario with right now. Their retirement time frame is in 12 years. So they've got a 12-year time frame until they want to retire. We've looked at it, and there's almost certainty that they're going to downsize their family home in retirement because of the fact that it's much too large. The kids are already close to moving out of home, so they know that in 12 years' time they almost certainly will be out of home. And so downsizing is definitely on the cards. What we've looked at is essentially a couple of different scenarios, which is, scenario number one is you do exactly what we were just talking about, which is wait, downsize as you go into retirement, use the superannuation rules to, in essence, drive that money towards superannuation and invest those proceeds to derive a retirement income. Or alternatively, one of the other considerations that we did consider, which we ultimately ended up going for, was purchase the property that they're going to downsize into today.
Yeah.
So you buy the property today and you don't actually move into the property until you, in essence, retire in 12 years' time. Now, the benefit of that is you consider what's the property market done over the last, however many years. Even if you put a, 4 or 5% growth rate on it, 3% growth rate on it, that $1.3 million property in 12 years' time, what's it going to be worth? Even if it, doubles in value, you're looking at $2.6 million. Yeah. Alternatively, you buy the property now, you pay the $1.3 million, you continue to hold your owner-occupied property. Excuse me.
So continue to own your owner-occupier property at the same time that you have purchased the future property. So you're then experiencing the capital growth over time. So you're not then needing to, in your hypothetical, needing to get in at the $2.6 million mark. You're getting it in at the $1.3 million mark, correct, which is a really worthwhile strategy to consider. I guess the thought process that goes behind that makes perfect sense. From an income perspective,
you have to be able to service the debt. So they're in a position where they're debt free now. Yeah. So rental income on the new property, plus their incomes over the next 12 years, is going to be enough money to actually drive down the debt to pretty much half of the debt at the very beginning. So we're looking at a scenario where the exact numbers I don't have, but we were talking about net approximately an additional $1.2 million in additional assets by executing that transaction today rather than waiting 12 years' time. And so everyone's scenario is different. I mean, not everyone's going to be able to have the cash flow to be able to do it, have the foresight to be able to do it, and have the risk tolerance to be able to do it. So you need to have all of those other things squared up at the same time. But depending on your situation, depending on what might be right for you, can dictate which way you go with downsizing and what's ultimately going to yield a better result for your situation.
Yeah, that's a really good example, Andrew. And I guess sort of pivoting slightly, but that's the same sort of thinking that we talk to people about when they're considering purchasing specifically around, say, first home buyers, right? And trying to use the amount of money that you've got as a deposit for a property that's, generally speaking, most of the time increasing in value. So it's the same thing here, that you're trying to grow your superannuation with the intent of, using it to be able to purchase a property in the future or whatever it may be, and then having that property potentially double over that 10-year, 13-year time frame. You're chasing a bigger target, or you know that you're going to execute on a bigger target down the track. So I think what that highlights in my mind is, it's, in theory, it's simple. I think having a consultation, getting some advice around that, getting somebody to map that out, I definitely think it's worthwhile, because, like you said, the difference in this example is you're talking north of $1 million.
Yeah.
It can be substantial.
Ultimately, it's not going to be right for everyone. So you need to essentially, whether it's with an advisor, whether it's on your own, but you need to map the numbers out, because it's all good and well to talk about these things in theory, but numbers don't lie. And once you've got the numbers to support your rationale behind it, that's ultimately going to dictate which way you go.
Yeah. Andrew, I think we've nailed that one in terms of downsizer contribution.
Yeah, absolutely.
I still like the idea of downsizing, just to
kick the kids out.
Get the kids out. Or the other one that I have seen is that parents have told the children that, hey, I'm going to retire at a certain age.
I'm downsizing, so you got to get out.
So you've got 2 years before you need to go, because we're selling the house in 2 years or whatever it is. And they put that in front of them. And when we move out, we're going to downsize, 1-bedroom apartment. That's it. There's no room.
Yeah. The 2 kids are going to have to share a room in their 20s. So you better be out by then.
Yep, exactly right. So I like that idea a little bit as well too, because I think the kids are going to need a nudge down the track, no doubt.
Yeah, very nice. Bills, thanks again for another podcast. Thanks to all of our viewers and our listeners. If you got some value out of that one, like, subscribe, and we look forward to catch you on the next podcast.
Thanks. Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions on what we talked about, or would like to have a chat about your money journey, visit us at 360fs.com.au.
Just a reminder to our listeners that the information contained in this podcast is general in nature and is not intended as personal recommendations for the audience. Please consider whether the information suits your circumstances before acting on it. This information is provided by Billy Amiridis and Andrew Nicolaou of 360 Financial Strategists Pty Ltd, authorized representatives and credit representatives of AMP Financial Planning.